deal with babysitting or getting the kids to do homework. Oh, how interesting, we're going to talk about that tonight.
Hooks,
So whatever happens to be, and then,
when she was taping today, she
20
had
minutes
a hair out like
we'll just
that.
say, hey, let's just go, we're done. But I can tell you the stuff I'm talking about takes way longer than just 90 minutes. So, Reader's Digest version. Hope you're okay at the end of your long work day.
That's about
You're most mentally alert, I'm sure. So you just need to know two things I want to add to what he said. One is, I'm a parent who had kids who went through a school district that did this stuff. So I'm coming to you as a parent who did it. Secondly, I've been doing this in all 50 states. So at elementary, middle, high school, collegiate level, and around the world, I'm bringing you news of the teaching profession. Where are we now? And some of you might be in education in other districts or in Glenwood, and some of you have no affiliation whatsoever with this, and you're like, I'm so glad other people can do that because I have no patience. Okay, that would be my wife. She's in private working world, so we have good conversations. You know, how does this translate to the corporate world, the world outside of just the public education realm? So I'm really okay really talking about some of the stuff. I enjoy the candor. But I am bringing you news of this stuff, and we may not do justice to it. So I'm hoping you're willing to have follow-up conversation. It's really okay. Those of you with me in September, when we talked about grading, who were you? Can you put your hand up if you were here in September? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's it. Oh, 5. We're good. Well, I didn't know we were going to be just repeating all that stuff. So there are 2 handouts. We only have 1 prepared for you. One handout is from September, and it's all the grading stuff outlined. And so I will be glad to bring that up and talk about it if you like. And Devin says he can make that handout available to all of you, and I'm going to give you my contact information. It's actually in your handout you have for tonight. And you can email me for it. If you want a follow-up conversation, that's very cool. So my plan was to do this. I wanted to honor the people who were with me in September, so I wanted to give you some new ideas. And what it is the periphery. If you do this in grading, it makes people think about, well, how do you teach responsibility? How do I build perseverance and grit and stick-to-itiveness in the next generation, in my own child? How do I teach them deadlines? That sort of thing. So all these things that are kind of swirling around grading, that kind of brought up when you think about standards reference grading, we were going to do several of those things tonight. That's the new stuff. But we're going to start with just provocations and clarifying what do we mean by standards reference grading. Now this does conclude our seminar. Thank you all for coming on time. I know it's totally rude. I will have fun at your expense repeatedly throughout the evening. So we'll have fun. I just want to tell you, those of you who really want to get into this stuff, if you want to take any photos of the screen itself because you want to save it for like thinking about later, that's really okay with me. And if you want the slides sent to you electronically, you can ask Devin or me, we'll just send you the slides. You can have it. It's really okay. But that's the contact information which you have in your slide, your handout right there. If you use your microscope, you might be able to make it out. Tiny little print is right there. That's my kitchen phone number. And I live 20 minutes from the White House. It's an East Coast time zone. After 4 o'clock your time, 5 o'clock my time, don't call my house. I'm a dad and a husband. And you have to understand something. My kids are heavily involved in marching band competitions. I'm a band parent. Don't mess with me. So that's it. Now we're moving back. Email's fine. If you want some other resources where you can really follow up with some stuff, you've got rickwormeli.com. And those are videos of me talking, but lots of other people, including a lot of people in Iowa who are really into this stuff. Letters I've written to local newspapers like Forest City Summit, some of you might be aware of that. Some parents were concerned about standards-based grading, and what they said about standards-based grading or standards reference grading wasn't actually true. So I asked the school district and the newspaper editor for Forest City Summit, look, can I write a letter of clarification? And they said, yeah, sure. And it ran over 2 issues because I write a lot, unusually verbose. But anyway, it took 2 letters to get it. And it seemed to calm things, so there's some clarifying there. Well, that's actually on the website too. So if you go to rickwormeli.com, you'll see lots of support stuff. And then, of course, if you want to email me, it's thecox.net. And Twitter, if you're into Twitter, rickwormeli2. There's actually a Rick Wormeli out there at Rick Wormeli. That was mine. It was hacked about a year and a half ago. The last 4 or 5 postings, highly inappropriate, but not from me. Remember that. It was hacked. So it's still there, about 5 years worth of conversation. But if you want to really get in contact with live me, you have to add a 2 to it. I'm really creative. 2. What is it, 2? I teach the future of math. All right, so let's go to some of the provocations, some things to think about. Every single thing I'm about to share with you It's actually true if you do standards reference grading. But some of it is like so shocking and stunning, and maybe counterintuitive. At first you might go, I'm not really sure. So we just want to think about it, and I want to clarify as we go through it. I did this exact same thing with teachers today. And so they all went through this stuff. And I told the teachers, you need to be a really articulate ambassador for this, as people are coming into learning this stuff. So, okay, we can do that. And I told them I was going to do that with you guys. One of the first things is this. We have to realize why we actually start grading. Because we decided to put one adult in front of a bunch of kids. See, what we found is, if I did like descriptive feedback, describing, here's the goal, here's where we are in relation to it, I'm going to suggest the following things you do. This is like a much better way to report human progress, as you're learning a skill or some cognitive thing, some thoughtful thing. But, there's one of me, and in my school district, 185 students is my student load. When I taught elementary levels, I would have like 7 subjects I had to teach, but I had 36 kids. And again, write this long narrative commentary, and all the kids are where they were. I have a life. I can't possibly do that. So we decided to go to a shortcut. Here's a symbol. Let's just use the alphabet. It seems to be easy and everybody's familiar with it. A, B, C, D. E would be the next natural letter, but we skip over E because we think E can stand for what? Excellent. What does F stand for? Failure? No. A doesn't stand for awesome. B, better. C, rather complacent. D, duh. Oh, for some kids, D is diploma. No. Or done. No, the letters don't stand for anything. So we found some symbol. It says, when you see this symbol, it means this evidence, this description of your performance. That's what it's supposed to be. So grades by themselves, total nonsense. Utter, complete nonsense. In fact, if I had my druthers, I'm actually a member of a Facebook community that does this, called Teachers Throwing Out Grades. We wouldn't have grades at all, because grades get in the way of learning. The moment you judge, you kind of shut down any interest in the learning. So yeah, we have grades just as a shortcut, but really they're just a placeholder for some larger commentary. And you want to make sure as a parent, you look for the commentary. And if the teacher can't really explain, like, check this out. Here are the scales. Emergent, developing, secure, masterful. Okay, really, what's the difference in terms of slope, point, intercepting, graphing inequalities, or writing a paragraph or a business letter? What's the difference between being adequate versus proficient? You're just arguing semantics. So the idea that I'm extremely transparent as a teacher, and you say, yes, we understand what you mean here, or no, we have no idea what you mean here, is actually really important for you to be a part of that equation. So they're supposed to be nonsense by themselves, and yet a lot of people put emotional baggage to it. Like if I said this, 2.5 on a 4.0 scale, would you say something like C+? And then whatever your emotional baggage is for a C+, you would attach to it. And you may not even read the descriptive feedback that goes with that symbol. So we're trying to become evidentiary. I told the teachers, what's the tagline from Jerry Maguire? Show me the money. And I want kids to say, and I want parents to say, and teachers to say, show me the evidence. So I want a kid to come and go, Mrs. Wormeli, when it comes to area versus perimeter, what evidence do we have to present? Not, if I got 4 more problems right, I could have a B. That doesn't really mean anything. I want them to speak in terms of the stuff they're actually learning. So when they come home and you go, so what'd you learn at school today? Nothing. Well, how was your day? Fine. I've been in your house? Yes, that's what happens in my house. You're just grunt your answers to me. I want kids to go, you know what? I understand the spread of civilization with the silk trade route of China, not so much with African caravans and the African continent. That actually happens in my classes. It didn't before we got to standards of reference, but now it does. So the kids aren't chasing a grade, they're chasing learning. That's kind of cool. Now, will grades always, okay, in these kids' lifetime right now, will grades always be a form of currency for the next level? Yes. But we try to get away from that as much as we can and really focus on learning. So it's kind of like this growth mindset that Carol Dweck, who does TED Talks and everything, talks about. And you think, is the child going, I have to look smart at all costs? Which means they might be likely to panic and cheat. Or, I have to learn this thing at all costs. I can't have a fake, false confidence, because I'm going to be humiliated later if I really don't know this stuff. So we find that standards reference grading is actually way more demanding. But one of the first things is, you're always speaking and rallying around evidence. So what if a teacher says to you, parents, your child's grade is here, or he has to learn this stuff. You would actually want to say, okay, and what evidence are you seeking for absolute proficiency or mastery in this? Like what's excellent and what's almost excellent, but not quite. So we all have a clear understanding. That's paramount. It's a non-negotiable. So ask the teachers, we're not quite getting that transparent communication. And that would be a really good thing to share with them if you don't think it's coming home. Second thing there, I guess I should turn this on. It's a new idea. This is going to be very different for some of us if we're not already there. And I talked about it in September. The grade is what you know at the end of all the journey, not the stuff you did en route. So think about that. Anything that is a learner method or teacher technique can't be used in the final grade. Check this out. A kid takes a quiz. It's like an F, it's terrible. And the kid's like, ah! So 2 weeks go by. He studies that stuff. Well, those same questions are on the big unit test at the end. And the teacher has designed the test to test those same things again that were on the quiz. The child does a beautiful job. It's excellent. It's loving. All the evidence in the world, the child is totally competent. That means the quiz is now a false report if I were to weave it in with the latest report. In other words, you include the latest evidence. It's kind of like when I teach you a new skill in your particular job, whatever it is, I say, look, I'm going to come back in 4 weeks and really assess you on this. You got 4 weeks to practice and get good at it. All right, fine. So I come back in 4 weeks and I test you, and that should be the indicator of where you are. But what if I came out just 1 week into it and I'm coaching you? So I need to give you some advice on this and advice on that. I'm like, oh, that's so nice. You're really helping me. I'm going to be much better prepared in another 3 weeks when you come back and evaluate. Yeah, it's really good. That's good. You're making good progress. Thank you. And on the way out, I go, oh, by the way, the stuff I observed today when you're kind of intermittent, kind of stumbling through it, I'm weaving that into your final report, baby. It's going to be part of the whole thing. You go, no, I was just learning. And that's the thing. The stuff we do en route to learning doesn't count. It's actually reported. You guys can see it online. But that's called formative. And that's the stuff like the status check. Where are you in your progress? But the final grade in the report card, higher or lower, whatever it is that end report. 40% of kids who go to college now have to retake high school classes in college, or military training or career training, the 3 different directions most people go post-high school, because the grades are so false. Here's an example. The teacher tested something in October and the child got an A. Now it's March. And I told the teachers today, you should do this. Put previous curriculum on subsequent tests. What? You do the plant unit in October. March comes around, do the moon unit. And right there in the moon test, it says, what's the vascular system of the plant called and how does it operate? And the students have done this. Mr. Wormeli, you put plant stuff on the moon test. You were cutting and pasting without proofreading. I did it on purpose. What, we still have to know it all these months later? Yes. And the usual response is, dang, you're tough. I know. Seriously, they have to carry it forward. That's the testimony for a grade. What we find is we want grades to have integrity. We want to be able to tell parents, yes, you can trust the grades to make a high-stakes soul diagnostic decision regarding your child's entire future, building it or destroying it. But you can't do that unless your standard is referenced and you've assessed it over time. Some of you know data analysis. You know that the larger sample size increases accuracy. So I have to have more than one piece of evidence. I've got to see a pattern. You know more than once, not just a fluke. And you can carry it forward. So in my class, this has happened. Kids have taken a test of something, got an A in October, they don't know it in February or March. They have an F. Huh? What if their grade goes down? Then their grade goes down. See how demanding it is? But they're allowed to relearn the stuff and be assessed anew, or reaccredited. So there's all kinds of hope, even though it comes across as a little bit strict and demanding. The kid's allowed to relearn it, and that will totally change the grade. It's what you know in the end, and what you carry forward. And I told the teachers, you cannot possibly do that with everything you teach. We have curriculum overload. So you have to do it with the what? The top 4 to 7 being boulders. That probably is the most they can do. So like in a science class, it would be scientific method. Maybe an English class, it would be argumentative paper. Or compare and contrast. Check this out. A kid spends 4 weeks in some English class learning how to do compare and contrast essay. The teacher gives advice, there's peer critiquing, they practice drafts in class, they get feedback, all this stuff. They turn in, they get like an A, yay, or whatever the grade is, right? About a week later, the teacher should do this. brand new compare and contrast writing prompt. I don't teach you at all. There's no assistance from me. What can you now do based on what you learned? I'll give you 4 weeks if you need to. You can peer critique. You can do all that stuff. If you ask me a question, I'll answer it. But I'm not going to teach you anything. Independent of all assistance, except what you choose to do. If you want to get some peers and sit around and share your ideas, that's fine. Whatever it is. But you turn in this paper that you wrote by yourself after peer feedback and all that. That second grade should supersede the first one. Because grade should be what you are now totally competent at doing. Not competent at doing while relying on some teacher to remind you of everything every single day. Does that make sense? So I do not want to set you up for embarrassment and humiliation, really, when there's a false sense you know it, when really you don't. So if you get an A or a B from me, you really know it. I have vetted it. And I got to tell you, to be really honest, it happened in my community, it happens in communities around the United States. If the school has not been doing standards reference grading like I'm describing, when even those A kids are always 4.0, you know, they get an A every time, grades go down initially for like half a year or so. Sometimes as long as a year. But what? And here's what happens. Hey, you got A's in math before he had you, but I was getting B's or C pluses. There must be something wrong with you as a teacher. And I say that, and the teachers in the room this morning all laughed nervously. I said, yeah, it's going to happen. And what you need to do is say, were they doing standards reference grading in the years prior to this? And you find out, no, they weren't. Well, I am. What happens is, so many kids have learned, and some of you might have been like this when you were kids, you learned how to play the system, to buffer your grades with a few peripheral things, just to make the grade go up. If I cover my textbook, bring in extra canned food for the canned food drive. How about we buffer the grade? Yeah. In other words, I jump through a teacher's hoops. I'm really good at playing the game of school. I find the classroom very friendly, or the grades have always been up. But when I actually say, now you really have to know it, not just sort of know it, not just buffer with other stuff. Oh, crud. Well, once kids realize that, they actually swing back and they do just fine. But initially, it's kind of a new way of thinking. I can't game the system anymore. So how many of you have ever done this, or maybe your own children have done this? If I get just this one score, it'll bring my average up to this, which will allow me to do. You ever do that kind of thing? Do you think kids ever think like that? I just have to do it well on 2 of them out of the 5, and then I pass. Or something like that. Yeah! That doesn't happen anymore in standards reference classes. You can't give them the system. That's scary to kids. But if we give them the tools to rise, they're so much better prepared for what's to come post-high school. So you see how this is a mindset too? Not just a set of things we do, but a mindset, a way of looking at it. I'm hoping you would grab onto that. As a parent, I'm going to certainly tell you one dad to the other, one parent to another, wow, what's the gift we give our next generation? And that would be one of them. Real confidence, not a false sense of confidence. So another one, you stop averaging. We thought averaging was legitimate. It was actually accurate because it seemed like the math was easy. And if there's math behind it, it must be credible. I'm going to ask all parents in the room. I tell teachers this all the time. Stop worshiping at the math altar. What? Well, there's got to be legitimacy. No, not necessarily. If you do mean, which is average, of all the kids' grades, then you try other forms of central tendency, like mode, which is the most consistent evidence over time. The median, which is kind of the middle one out of the whole range, they actually have higher correlations with outside the school standardized test scores than the averages. So on the website, the rickwormeli.com and other places, you'll see there's a chemistry teacher in New York State. Chemistry has a Regents exam. You also have the AP chemistry test. And so this teacher named Eric, he heard about this stuff. I was working with the school district, and he said, all right, I'm going to try an experiment. I'm going to do the mode of all my grades, I'm going to do the mean of all my grades, and then I'm going to compare it to the AP chemistry test and to the New York State chemistry exam for Regents, and see which one compares more favorably. He made a school board presentation on the results. Well, if I'm going to put it on the website, and I'm biased for a certain point of view, what do you think happened? Which one had a higher correlation? Mode or mean? Mode. So here's an awkward question to ask a teacher. This child got an A in your class but failed the state exam. What does that say about you and your grading? Or reverse it. The child failed your class, aced the exam, or aced your class and got an F on the exam, or a 0, whatever it was. You would want a teacher say, if I say this child is sort of positive close to excellent, You test them outside of school, it better not come out to be excellent or like poor. It better be whatever that scale is, sort of possibly close to excellent. There better be integrity. You can trust my grades. They mean what they say. That's what we're talking about. Standards reference grading. So averaging is one of the things that most schools stop. Even though parents, a lot of them are like, no, you're doing standards reference grading. I get it. Yeah, but what's the average? Like, oh man, the message didn't get across. So you can do average if you absolutely need to sleep at night. But I'm telling you, it doesn't correlate. It's not as legit, it's not as accurate. It's kind of like, running the mile. You used to run the mile at 8.5 minutes, and 7.5, and 7:10, then it was 6:50, then it was 6:14, then it was 5:22. Well, it takes the average of all that. That's your official time for the mile? No, I actually run faster now. The average is falsified. How many of you have ever been rated in your job pretty high? But somebody goes, by the way, remember 3 years ago when you're incompetent and just learning? I have to take that score and weave it in. So this is like 100%, but I have to weave in the other one, so it brings you down to like a 65. You would never tolerate your earlier incompetence being woven into the current report of competence. And we're trying to tell teachers to do the same thing with students. And then, over and over again, we're overwhelmed with the research. Doug Reeves, John Hattie, Bob Marzano, these are names I can cite for you by email if you want. Later on, or overwhelmed. If you have a separate column or a little section of a report card dedicated to work habits and effort and behavior, and they get grades in it, you put it much more importantly on the radar scope. And the kids actually mature faster in those things that are really important, like meeting deadlines, using quiet indoor voice, practice personal hygiene successfully. Next time, a little less axe. Or whatever it might be in your community, but it is my community, an issue. Whatever it is, I give you a grade for, here's what you know about slope-intercept, three-dimensional solids, all that stuff. And here's what you do with keeping yourself organized and doing task analysis and working collaboratively with others. They pay more attention to grades like that if there's a separate radar scope, a separate column. So I told teachers back in September, and I kind of alluded to this today, you should count homework 100%. You should count behavior 100% of its own column. It's a separate thing, not this. Here's what you know about parts of a plant, plus all the times you were quiet, use the indoor voice, and were nice to each other, and put name, date, and period at the top right corner of your paper. Now you're fudging the grade, higher or lower. And I said before, no. We're about integrity and clear communication. It turns out when there's a separate thing for the academic standards and a separate report for the work habits, kids mature in both competence and the maturity skills that are so desperately needed. So you should see if you don't currently do it. And some people today said you're doing it, some people said they weren't sure if they're doing it. But you should see a separate indicator. And I told teachers, if your current report card doesn't allow you to do it, make up your own addendum and get that in the hands of parents. Turns out sports recruiters, college admissions officers, and military recruiters love seeing some kind of report as to the character of the person, separate from academics. And one of the biggest factors in college admissions, do I have demonstrated evidence in this student's report of being resilient, of handling adversity in a constructive way, of being persevering. A whole bunch of students, 2012 went to 50%, which is scary, it used to be only 1/3. But a ton of students who go to college quit these days, halfway through. All that time, energy, and money vetting you and denying somebody else who would have made it through the 4 years or the 5 years. They want to see proof that you persevere and you endure, that you have grit. All those buzzwords you hear out there in the media these days. There are TED Talks on it if you want to focus on that more. So yeah, I can do that. I can report that separately. Anybody have a question or issue with any of those provocations on that stuff? I've been talking a lot. You okay? At least politely for now. You can ask devil's advocate questions like this. Like, you really don't have this question, but you know people, if you went back and told them about what we talked about today, they would have a question? You can offer that too. Hey Rick, what would you say to parents who say, because they don't say it, you're reporting what somebody else said, not what you believe. Do you kind of sort of want to hear the answer to? All right, let's take a look at these four. Put 4 up there at a time. You have to stop seeing grades as reward. Oh, I tell teachers, he works so hard, he should have a higher grade. He didn't work at all, he's kind of a jerk. I'm giving him a lower grade. That's old school and gone. Can't do that anymore. So I have a kid who's straight 100s, but he's actually really high maintenance in the class. He's really frustrating, he stresses people out. Can't lower his grade 1 inch. I can give a low grade in classroom behavior, that's fine, but But you know, about the math and the science, he rocks it. Turns out kids will mature in those softer skills that are so important if they're actually getting accurate reports with their academia. Okay? So if you think any grade has been fudged higher or lower as a classroom motivational thing, that's gone. You can't do it anymore. And we can talk more about motivation. In fact, I have some slides coming up about that. Oh, if I don't see grades as reward, they won't do this stuff. My response to you, poppycock and buffalo bagels. That's a Virginia term. We're agricultural state too. Right. Second one, it's okay to do alternative things as long as it holds you accountable for the same stuff. So what if a kid doesn't do well on a test? All right, we're going to do alternative thing. Make a poster for the library. That's not the same thing. So it's got to be the same evidence. We're cool. Here's the problem. What if I say I want you to do a written paragraph or essay on this thing, and I'm really not testing writing? I'm just using writing as a vehicle, conveyance, to demonstrate the evidence, right? Well, I can do an oral interview. I can do all kinds of stuff. You can do an interpretive dance for all I care. Dedicate a website to it. I don't know. Whatever you want to do. But man, I have to see the exact same evidence. So you can't do something cutesy. There's a thing called credit recovery out there. You use credit recovery so you can have sports eligibility. So you didn't do well in your class on that paper. So could you, like, I don't know, make up a board game? Dedicate it? No, you can't. You actually have to do the thing. You have to do it well. Kids learn this. I'm going to have to learn it sooner or later. I might as well learn it now and have a hassle-free life. I've had kids do this. They're tearful. High school, middle school, elementary. But it's really high school, middle school they cry the most. Isn't it weird? It is. Seriously, man. I was like a jerk. And you're going to let me redo it for like full credit? As long as they show the evidence? Yeah. Why would you do that? And I said, well, incompetence is never acceptable. I'm saving you from your immature self. And I'm not going to let your irresponsibility dictate your whole future. I'm going to hit your face, man. I'm going to demand you learn this. Because competence is the thing that will lead to your future success. And the response is usually this. I love you, man. That's great, but you still can't have my beer. Alternative assessments are fine, but if you think teachers are doing foo-foo fluff, you better call them. I will not tolerate that. I've had kids like that. I did a test in chromatography. You spray things out in their colors according to different wavelengths and all kinds of stuff. And densities too. But anyway, this teacher did this. Well, you can do an acrostic poem. You remember what an acrostic poem is? You take the starting letter and you go, like, C stands for color, H for hue, R for red, O for orange, M for magenta. Really? It's not really assessing their understanding of chromatography. It's a cutesy thing. Oh, you put glitter around the edges of your interactive notebook. I had to say, how does that show in-depth understanding of the standard? Oh, it doesn't? You're not going to get an A because you put glitter on your cover. So, substance, no foo-foo fluff, no mess around. And the kids realize in the business, I will be their advocate. I will have your back, man. I will keep you from humiliating yourself, and I will not humiliate you. But you, by golly, will learn it. And no skipping around on anything. And the kids realize they can't pull anything over on me because it's really hard to do that in a standards reference class. Single sitting tests, they can't count a lot. You know, like a 1 hour final exam or a 2 hour? All kinds of things can be distorting the performance there. So I told the teachers, you have to have a pattern. You have to have what? Well, 2 pieces of evidence is kind of a direction, but it's not a pattern. I said 3, 4, 5, 6. 4 to 6 is your goal. So the last 2 or 3 weeks of school, you can do a single sitting final exam. That's fine. But it better be accompanied with maybe something they do at home and bring in. Maybe something they do as an oral presentation. Maybe a second little quiz in the class. Put those together. That can be a composite final exam. That can count a lot. That can count for half the grade, as far as I'm concerned. But if all they have for a final is one little 1 hour on this one particular calendar date, they better only count that about 10% or less of the grade. You can't count it a lot. Otherwise, it distorts the accuracy. You see how that works? You want evidence over time. Now, here's what teachers should be doing. He has to show it like 5 times. Why not 6? That just seems abusive. You see how it's an arbitrary line we just decide? So you can help them say, you know, a pattern is at least 3 or 4. That's okay. But you have to require them that they do it 18 times? It's a little over the top, man. They've already demonstrated they know it. So there's that feedback, that window in there. What's legitimate? And then down below, I think if you find out there's a test in 5 weeks, you should say, so what's going to be on the test? And really, that's increasingly likely that they'll retain it. What? When you give the questions out ahead of time, and kids have a very clear visual, remember Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind? Some of you are aware of his work. Right? If I have a very clear visual of what's expected, I totally remember this stuff way longer. It's kind of like bringing your car to the mechanic's garage. Would you actually go up and do this? Play kind of coy and secretive? Hey, there's something wrong with my car, and I know what it is, but I'm not going to tell you. If you can figure out what it is and fix it, I'll pay you. Otherwise, nothing. No soup for you. No, you wouldn't do that. You say, look, it's making this mistake. Here's the thing that I think is broken, and go for it. You're very open and very transparent. So if a teacher says, or if a student goes up and goes, look, is this going to be on the test? I think the teacher hasn't done his or her job. The job is to be extremely overt. Here's an example in my class. The very first day of the unit, there's a list of things I'm going to ask on a test. For example, what was the relationship between France and the South prior to Lincoln's assassination, and how did it change during the Reconstruction era? 5 weeks later, number 7. What was the relationship between France and the South prior to Lincoln's assassination? How did it change during the Reconstruction era? Where have I heard that before? When your brain is primed to look for that stuff, it remembers it, it elevates it, and the kids remember it forever, which is the goal. I told teachers the testimony for grades that they carry it forward, right? Long-term retention. Like dare we go across the summer. They remember stuff instead of summer loss and regression. Yeah, we can do that. So hopefully it's none of this stuff like you and me, maybe some of our teachers. A whole bunch of stuff from high school I really don't remember at all. And we're trying to change it. Anything there, give you pause, make you kind of go, huh? And it's in out. Okay. Right? Let's look at this one. Yeah. Whenever they demonstrate mastery, they get full credit. I don't care if it's 3 months later. I told teachers today, you are not to let their immaturity get in the way or their lack of development, and you're not to hide behind the factory model schooling. What? 1870s and 1920s, we had a committee of 10, these gathered professors, who decided to invent a thing called high school. And then they invented a standardized curriculum. Here was their grand idea. Hour of math, hour of history, hour of science, nudge. And then we'll do like an hour of art and then physical well-being. Get them up, move them out, rawhide. So we have no idea what I just said, but anyway. It's an old TV show, rawhide. Anyway. The idea that you do an hour of this, which is 50 minutes and 50 minutes in the modern classroom, sometimes it's 37, sometimes schools have the short classroom, no more. It doesn't lead to long-term retention of what it is. It's this compartmentalized factory model. So, kids are developing, but they don't develop at the same rate. If I was teaching you guys a class, a lot of you would need more time, some would need less time. And it wouldn't make you go lockstep through every little thing, regardless of where you get so mad at me, you resent it. It's actually not helpful to anybody. So, I generally have a plan. Most kids fit the plan. But let's say a kid, for whatever reason, he made a bad decision, or just cognitively, intelligently, he's not there yet. Doesn't matter. Physically, he needs to practice a skill. Whatever. He hasn't developed the muscles to do that particular athletic movement, or whatever it is. I don't say, oh, you didn't have it by the one calendar date I arbitrarily declared from on high. So now all hope is gone. You're off the island. I extinguish your torch. No. I just say, you have a math, but it's completely recoverable, in full. I'm not going to hold you to your earlier digressions. Some of you wouldn't be in the room right now if we held you to your earlier digressions. I'm talking to you, those of you who used to dress golf. You don't either one. Wherever it is. So, I'm going to say, look, 2 months later, and you finally demonstrate evidence of it, full power to it. I will climb the highest mountain, and I will say, by golly, she is proficient. He knows it. And some of you will be at different rates. Most kids can do most things at the same rate that you share in the class, but as a teacher open to, hey, it doesn't really matter as long as you learn it. You got 9.5 months to figure this out. And then just for clerical sanity, you have to cut the line and move on, and your grade is what it is. So I don't have any problem giving like incompletes, or my favorite is NTY, not there yet. Think about riding a bike the very first time when you taught your kid. Like my son was like, Daddy, you hold on to the back seat, or Daddy. Daddy, hold on, yes, I'm holding on. Daddy, holding on, yes, I'm holding on, yes, I'm holding on. And of course, I take my hand off, and I'm still walking beside him. Yes, I'm holding on, yes, I'm holding on. Crash into the rhododendron. Oh man, first time you're riding a bike, you crashed and burned. I guess you're a non-rider. I'll have to sign you up for Uber the rest of your days. No. What does a good parent do? Get on the bike and do it again. And let me give you a little advice on how to do it. And keep working it, right? That's kind of the thing you do as a good parent. Well, that's kind of what we're doing there. It doesn't matter when they get it, but what if I was sticking with the school factory model? No, you have one and done. That's it. You take the test, you didn't do well for whatever reason, you have an F. It goes against like everything we know in human psychology to do that. Can airplane pilots redo their landings? Think carefully before you answer me. Hundreds of times before real passengers are on the plane. Can surgeons redo the surgery? Of course they can. On cadavers and super realistic surgical suites when they do it virtually, and the first 6 they do with live human tissue, they have a mentor standing next to them. How do teachers get good at teaching? They teach a lot. They didn't just like 2 or 3 little activities and took a little test and suddenly they're copacetic wonderful the rest of their career. How do you get confident in anything? It's reiteration. And I was at Harvard 3 years ago, and I was the final presenter and had to take what everybody said and distill what it would look like in a modern classroom. There's all these scientists presenting their research and studies, and one of the biggest themes was this: you have to do something 30 to 36 times just to get to an 80% proficiency rate, let alone higher. Can you imagine a teacher taking that back to the classroom? All right, class, I want you to do 36 persuasive essays in a row just to get sort of good at it. We don't have time to teach really well because we have this factory model schooling, 50 minutes a day, 9.5 months. That's a joke. We do the best we can within that. So I told the teachers, with your big, bolder standards, the most pivotal things you teach, you want to do reiteration a lot and be very open to that for the redo stuff. But the idea that you get confident in something by doing a lot, getting feedback, and then trying a little bit better, revising it in light of the feedback, that's the professional model for like every single profession. How did any of us, EMTs, architects, accountants, pharmacists, nurses, how did anybody get good at their stuff? Farming, anything along those lines. Plumbing. Yeah, you did a lot of plumbing. You ran a lot of irrigation lines. You did a lot of pharmaceutical stuff. That's how you get good at it. It's kind of like that old phrase, who's the best, or what's the best, like I said, who's the best geologist in the world? The one who's seen the most rocks. I like that. Grades by themselves are inaccurate forms. We kind of talked about that already. Homework counts 0 in the academic grade. It counts a bajillion a lot in its own column. That would be the difference. Anybody have a yeah, but, or concern about that? Because later I'm going to talk about how do you get kids to do homework if you're not going to count a lot in the academic grade. Don't worry. That's coming. Okay? Yeah? Oh, yeah. Yeah, at the end of that, for clerical sanity, you usually just say, look, anything that's been incomplete, because I was writing I, incomplete, or some schools use this, NE, no evidence, no evidence, no evidence. So it's not really like a failure, there's no evidence presented. And the grade is supposed to be a reflection of evidence presented. So, I don't present evidence means I get privileges revoked and denied until the evidence is presented, whatever it is. Think about this, which one makes a kid groan louder? They hate getting it written at the top of the paper. An F or an NTY? Not there yet. For most kids, it's the NTY, because they're like, oh crap, I still have to do it. But an F means, I might get grounded, but I don't have to do the project. Their burden has been lifted from them. So now, if it's an NTY, I have to do the new stuff we're learning next week, plus the previous stuff. Whoa, now I have double jeopardy, double burden I am carrying. Kids don't think this is a treat. They don't think they got away with something. They hate redos and retakes because you have to do this. Show relearning before reassessing. You don't have to keep weighing the cow, hoping for a different weight each time. It doesn't happen. So the kids submit a plan, parents have to sign off, there's consequences, all the stuff they jump through. They just say this is actually so cool. Is this easier if I study and do right the first time? You think. That's a really maturing moment for a lot of kids. And I'm just saying this, the maturation comes from going through a redo, reassessment, relearning kind of experience. The maturation does not come from just getting an F written at the top. Because that's not enough of them. I tell teachers this, it's going soft. You kind of lost your way as a teacher by letting a kid take an escapist path and not be held accountable for learning. Incompetence is never an acceptable term. Competence is the only acceptable term. So I'm not going to let your immaturity dictate it. I've had kids do this. I don't care if you get an F. School sucks. That kid should not be left in charge, particularly when he says sucks so publicly. I'll always settle for an F. So at the end of the year, most school districts make this policy. After 2 weeks, all incompletes become an F for clerical sanity. If you want to go back and relearn this stuff, we will consider going back and changing the transcripts, but not until you actually do that. Seriously, a lot of kids will do mentoring or tutoring or take a class, and they'll represent evidence from the previous year of the biggest boulder standards, like in early August before the new school year starts, and the teachers will go back and change their grade. Because 9.5 months is an arbitrary hiding behind the factory model schooling, which I tried to share with you earlier, doesn't work. So it takes some students 2 or 3 years to learn author inference. You know, let's infer the author's meaning. What was the symbolism of that novel? Some right now are going, I'm so glad I don't have to take that class anymore. And some are like, oh, it was really cool for me, no problem. It's really different. It depends. What if I said we're going to do functions or exponential functions? I don't know what it might be. Logarithms. So like, no. Well, it really depends what's going on. Wherever you are, I just give you the credit at that moment. But for clerical sanity, it's an F. Now it's the student's burden to prove an overturning of the F. So F is not really failure. It's just no evidence presented as of the one calendar date we imposed. That's all it's saying. Now, does it mean you get rights and privileges granted? No. So you are denied certain opportunities if it remains no evidence. But in a perfect world, here's what we would do in your report card. It would just say incomplete like forever. And you'd be denied certain privileges or granted certain privileges based on subsequent performance. How's that sitting with you, okay? All right? It's kind of like you're not certified until you're certified. So you make the first attempt at a certification, auto mechanics, licensure exam, whatever it is, architectural license, you're not certified. So you don't get hired, you don't get to work, or whatever it is. You work as a mentee, not a mentor of others, whatever it is. But eventually you get your certification, and now you get full rights and privileges granted because you're fully certified. You're actually a valid assessment. You know what you're doing. Okay? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I haven't forgotten you. Don't worry. Go ahead.
I'm nervous about the teacher workload.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too.
Like, if a student can take
Infinite tests.
anything.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that they have to submit a plan and parents have to sign off on it. Still, it seems, I mean, as a teacher, they fail a test, right?
Another test, right? I don't know. Well, teachers have no lives. Next question. Now, in Virginia, we actually invented the 32-hour day for teachers, and it works really well. I don't know what you're doing in Iowa with 24 hours. No, I ask teachers that all the time, and I had to go through this too, because at first I was really anti a lot of this, and then I started doing it and go, oh yeah, it works. And I said to teachers, what do you do when a kid doesn't learn something? You're a conscientious person, you really care. What do you do? I pull them one side and reteach it to them. That's all I'm asking you to do. And the bigger news is this. It just means on the grade report, are you going to do one of these things? You only get like 70. That's the highest one you can do. Out of honoring those who got an A the first attempt around. Or I shall give you just half a point for each problem you go back and correct. Or I'll average a new grade performer one. Teachers today will still take care of this. If it's just something really pivotal in your education, they will find a way to build into the day to make sure you're up to speed, because incompetence is not something we usually want to settle for, right? So in the school day, where do you find time when the regular classroom doesn't work for a kid? I wrote an article where you find time like that, and I shared it with teachers. And so I'll share it with you guys if you want, you can have it. But where do you find time to do that? It might be some stuff out home or beyond school hours. It might be something during the school day that you can do. For example, we have online tutorials. And as long as the teachers looked at the tutorials to make sure they're mathematically or scientifically accurate, Khan Academy, I'm looking at you. Okay, if the teacher's not, then the teacher can say, look, here are 4 different videos that are available at SchoolTube, TeacherTube, the teacher channel on YouTube, teacherchannel.org, very good stuff. Khan Academy, if stuff is good. They go on this and go look at these and study these. They'll come back, you and I will have a conversation while the rest of the class is working on something, and if I think that you're really getting it much better, then we'll think about reassessing at some point. And it turns out there are websites dedicated where teachers can go online and download each other's exams and get really good questions. Like it's a clearinghouse of questions on this topic, and this topic, and this topic. And it also turns out that teachers can bank. If the test is done in sections, here's what should be happening. Save everybody's sanity. You have safely stored the stuff of which you did well, and you only have to redo those subsections of which you did poorly. So a lot of redos in my class over the years, decades now, have been like a 10 to 15 minute interview back at my desk, or after school, or before school, something like that. I didn't have to reinvent an entire other test for it. Now, if something is large and complex, like play the concerto, theme and an essay. That like weaves through everything. You can't bank small portions. So if it was an essay and you blew it on the third main body paragraph and the conclusion, you only redo those subsections. You don't redo the whole thing. And then some stuff actually spirals. So for example, this was a skill in isolation. It had no meaningful context. We're going to use it in some unit like 5 weeks from now. So, okay, you didn't get it here. I reteach you, stop buying. But later, 5 weeks, when I do that new project, that new skill, I can see the skill demonstration before. Apply here, that's when the redo is. So it turns out there's actually a lot of places where you can redo stuff, but I tell teachers all the time, you cannot physically redo all the stuff you have to teach. Don't even try. You know, be honorable, that's fine, but choose your 4 to 8 big boulders, the most leveraging things to teach. And then maybe some of the secondary things, but don't try to do all of it. I also tell teachers this, don't do redos the last week of the marking period. When do most students get worried about their grade? The last week of the marking period. What's going on the last week? I'm doing report cards, I'm cleaning equipment, I'm ordering new supplies. I am overwhelmed. I like to go home and smell my wife's hair. Did I say that out loud? I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. Anyway, I have a life outside of school, and I physically can't do redos the last week when kids are all like, I can't take this grade home to my mom and dad. So for 8 weeks, I am Mr. Hopeful. Then the last week, the grade book is cement. Life is hard and then you die. Suck it up, junior. Is my usual attitude. But I'm okay. It's a modern hypocrisy. School is not set up to teach. School is set up to protect the factory model, to protect the status quo. So for 8 weeks, we can do redos, and I'm very mindful for kids. With kids, they can do that stuff, but I can't do it with everything. And it turns out, like me, teachers go, there's no time to do that. I say, seriously, you're conscientious. What do you do when a kid doesn't learn it? Well, and they start making a list of all the cool stuff they do. So that's all you do. I'm just saying this. Give them full credit when they eventually get there. And don't assume they're all exact same pacing as everyone else. That goes against everything we know about how the mind learns. And you just say, okay, it's fine. It's the reporting, whether it's permanent or not, unrecoverable. I tell teachers all the time, give kids zeros, give them Fs. Just make them recover in full, not the partial, and you'll actually be serving kids well. So you're right, I don't have an easy answer for you, but I have listed how you can actually save time and sanity, and a lot of teachers have tried it and they found success with it. I wrote an article, in case you're curious, called Redos and Retakes Done Right. So if you type in Wormeli, my name, and Redos and Retakes Done Right, it'll come right up. But if you write a note to yourself, I'll just send it to you. It's really okay. It's online. A lot of people put it on their school websites. Okay? I don't mean to flip it off or to be dismissive, but we have lots to encounter. Disaggregated grades, that means in all the quiz papers and tests and projects, the standards should be written at the top or the front sheet. And the kids should get a separate score for each one. So what does that mean? It's the end of this one. You might remember this? Ancient Egypt unit test, B, verse 88. That's like, come on. So the standards about Egypt, not just what the general, or how about this? Unit test 1, unit test 2, unit test 3, and unit test 4. Mrs. Smith, your daughter Amy, she did very well in test 1, 2, and 4, but Bob test 3. What can we do to work with your child? It's a terrible conversation. Because what's the parent going to ask? What would you ask? What was on test 3, right? Yeah, I want them to say, your child is very proficient at these things, but is really struggling in these areas. So here's some suggestions of a work plan. That's actually much more helpful. Like when I go sit down at a parent-teacher conference, I want to know, like, tell me how I can help my child. And I can validate and affirm my child. I mean, I want to know all this stuff. There's no owner's manual. I would like an owner's manual, but I didn't get one when the child was born. And then I need a new one, like every 3 or 4 years. Like, who are you and what have you done with my son? Do it through it. Let me just give you a few more here. Sorry. Anything up there? Oh, feedback is huge. If you don't think your child's getting feedback, you better ask the teacher about it. Can kids learn without grades? Yeah. Grades get in the way. They can't learn without feedback. So here's an example of feedback. You point and describe. I noticed you chose to do this. And this was the result. Is that what you wanted? That's feedback. The moment you judge, you shut it down. And one of the biggest things I've learned is this. When you give feedback, you talk about decisions the student made, not quality. So here's an example of judgment. Hey, this is excellent. That's judgment. Even though it's high praise, it's judgment. Judgment shuts learning and maturation down. The moment you judge. Here's another one. This is a sorry hot mess. I'm calling your parents. Don't want to do that. Here's an example of good feedback. I'm having trouble finding evidence for your claim. Can you help me find it? I love this one, and I love when teachers do this. I do it a lot in my class, and I really appreciate when my own children's teachers do it. The student has done something at home or maybe in the class, and the teacher puts an exemplar, which is like an example that's really well done, on the desk. It says, write a letter to me comparing your effort with the exemplar. Tell me how it matches and how it doesn't, and how you would have to change things in order for your effort to match the quality of this one. That's the child giving self-feedback. Well, it turns out we're overwhelmed again with evidence. Dylan Williams, so many others, John Hattie, a lot of names you may not recognize, but they're out there. If you like it, I can send you a list. We found that when students can self-monitor, they actually achieve the higher goals way more often. So here's what I tell teachers. I'm interviewing every kid in your class. What are you supposed to be learning? What are you supposed to be learning? What are you supposed to be learning? Would every one of your students be able to tell me that and be accurate? That in itself is like a miracle. But the next question is actually more important. Here's the next question. And where are you in relation to it? The truth is this, if a child can tell you what they're supposed to be learning, what the goal is, and where they are at any moment in their journey towards it, they hit the target way more often. So a lot of teachers aren't really good at getting the students in their class to monitor their own progress. And I spent a whole bunch of time in September saying, oh please, teachers choose to self-monitor. So if a child never has to say, how am I doing in your class? That's not a cool question. It's a sign you really haven't been doing a good job of feedback. So I gave lots of techniques. I can give you techniques too if you want me to send that stuff to you. It's actually in the handout from September, so ask me for it or ask Devin for it. The middle one might or may not be important to you, but a lot of teachers are like, I have to get through my curriculum. I don't have time to have kids like self-monitor. But every time you self-monitor, like you take a quiz or like a little exit slip or a little quick write or something, you're actually relearning this stuff. You're actually building neurons in the brain. It's an overt act of direct instruction, not like a sidebar. Stop everything, no more lecture. I'm required now to do formative assessment. So you're actually still teaching when they're sitting there taking a quiz. You're actually relearning the stuff every time you access it. And then down below, we talked a little bit about that already. Oh, we didn't talk about cheating. What if a kid plagiarizes or cheats? Do you think he should be given full credit on a redo? Well, you have to decide, what do we know about how to teach kids to start behaving ethically and not cheat? Do you know, not one research study says, give them an F. None of them say, do it through grading. Here's what you do. You blew the trust. We put trust in you. You denied it. So you're going to write a letter of apology to your family for bringing shame upon the family name. Oh, yes, I do that. You write a letter of apology to the class for breaking the community trust. You might have to do service to the school. And now you're not going to be trusted for a period of 5 weeks. Like, I don't care if you're 17 years old. You need a buddy when you go to the bathroom. You can't be trusted. You have to go to the kiln to see if your ceramic thing was glazed properly. You still have to take a buddy. I'm not going to trust you. We're not going to trust you with this privilege or this privilege or this privilege. And by the way, now you have to start all over. And every step of this project, you have to prove you did it independent of all assistance. And I have to see actual proof, which means you probably have to do a lot of it right here. But if you go through it ethically all the way through, I will give you the full credit. What kids learn is this. I'm going to do it ethically from the very beginning. I might as well do it now and make sure I have that hassle-free life, that happier life. They learn more about time management and ethics by going through a complete recovery and having an integral grade, an accurate score, than just by giving an F, thinking that will teach them, that'll learn them. You don't want to do that. You don't want to be a rim waver, where all you do is wave from the rim of the pit the child has dug so deeply for himself. I told you this would happen if you didn't start 3 weeks ago. And now you're turning in and you got an F. And here's a long list of bad stuff that's going to happen to you. What's that? Yes, I know it's cold and lonely down there. And you're right, there's no way out. That'll learn you. It's not the F that teaches. It's the recovery from the F. So a better response from an adult is this. Jump in the pit with them. And act like it even though you've never been there. Act like you've been there before. I know the way out. Come, follow me. To walk side by side with the child as he recovers from irresponsible behavior actually teaches way more than just the label of advocate teach. It's the recovery. I do second career training of every single branch of military service. Even Merchant Marines, Coast Guard, and Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, all of those. And I've asked them to bring their manuals in. Every single one of the training manuals. And it's actually in the handout in the September one if you want to see it. There's one from the Air Force Colonel in Colorado Springs. Every single one of them, they allow redos for full credit, even though they might have screwed up for some reason. Now, the plagiarism thing, you have to understand, if you're an adult and you're certified in the field and you plagiarize a cheat, that's very different. We're talking about morphing irresponsible humans who are coming to know stuff. And most of the time in high school, middle school, level and elementary, when a child cheats, it's a panicked moment of indecision and they just make a bad decision. If you hold them that forever, that label forever, they won't actually learn the ethics. So does breed resentment and irrational rationalization that everyone else hates them when they drop out. So I think we want to engender hope. You're allowed to be an idiot when you're young. And we will be your pit crew. Is NASCAR big in Iowa? It's big in Virginia. We'll be your pit crew, get you up, dust you off, and get you on the road again. Put a little air in your tires, too. Last slide of all this. Oh, what about that one? 100-point scale, all zeros should be made into 50s. Or higher? Because you want equal influence of all the grades upon all the total. If you get 1 0 and the teacher's using only percentages, 1 0, it'll take like 9 or 10 perfect hundreds in a row just to overcome the deficit caused by that skewing zero to get just to a D range, which totally, why should I bother as a kid? I got 1 0, I can't recover from. So things have to be recoverable. There has to be a sense of hope. So I'm saying this, give the kid an F. A 50 is an F. Or 60. By the way, some school districts, the high number you give is a 70. Because 70 starts the F range. The F range is 70 to 0, not 50 to 0, 59 to 0, or something like that. Depends what the community will tolerate. But I'm saying, just make sure if you're still stuck averaging, that all the letter grades have the equal influence on the averaging. You know, an A is like 90 to 100, that's 11 points influence. 80 to 89, that's 10 points. 70 to 79, that's a C. 60 to 69, that's a D. 60 down to 0, that's the F. That's incredibly skewing. No mathematician would ever tolerate that as an accurate portrayal. So I told the teachers, if you're really stuck on this, please understand grades are not compensation. Because some teachers will do this. I'm not going to give a kid a 50 if he does nothing. He's going to get the score for nothing called 0. Because if I was doing a job, I wouldn't pay someone $60 if they didn't do their job. And I'm like, I'm totally with you. I agree. Don't pay them money if they don't do the work. That has nothing to do with what we're talking about. I will explain. We're just making sure if you're still stuck averaging, each grade has equal influence mathematically. That's all. There's more to that in the handout from September if you like. Drop the 100-point scale. It means you no longer have 88s to 77s and things like that. It was never meant to report human progress against real learning standards. It's something we just kind of said, oh, the math is easy, so let's do it. You want smaller scales. The smaller your scale, the higher the HR rate of reliability. Which means like a B in my class represents the same learning as a B in some other teacher's class. You guys know it's not urban legend, it's actually true, right? A kid learns this amount, it's an A to one teacher, but the same building can only be a B or a C. They're like, oh. And that means that's a school district that cannot claim integrity. And you better not make any major decisions based on the grades by that school district until the child presents this evidence and I perceive it as the exact same score as some other teacher in their class with that same evidence presented. It's really huge. That happens in standards reference schools. And the last one we were talking about, you could define those. There's more here, but for the sake of time, I'm going to skip past it and go to this. All right? So, I have about 25 minutes to do the biggest part of the entire presentation. But I did want to answer your questions about grading, and I didn't realize so many of you had not been here in September. For those of you here in September, I so apologize if any of that was too repetitive for you. But you must admit, it was a laser version. Super fast, I'm hoping. All right, that's actually my son, Ryan. He's in college, or he's just out of college now, so he's older. But that's him going into 8th grade. We do national parks every year. That's outside of Moab, Utah. So we know that's where they filmed the Aaron Ralston story, starring James Franklin. So Ryan, my son, he's right there, and we're Orioles fans from the DC area. We like the Nats, but no Orioles. Anyway, he climbed the top of the bridge and goes, Dad, this is like so cool, take my picture. And I did. So the next photo you see is the same human creature 1 year later at the next family vacation. Ladies and gentlemen, before, after. Before, after. See, what works with this child will not work with that child. It's kind of crazy. Kids change a lot. So I made the case today when I showed these photos, you can't teach blind to the students you serve. You need to go out of your way to get to know the kids. And the root of modern pedagogy, which is the science and craft of teaching, the root of all we know today is to be a responsive teacher. I have to take what I know about you, like I find out you're really inefficient. I might find a few fishing analogies that will help you understand this really advanced idea. Because I know you, if I just write an analogy, you have a mini epiphany. I get it, it's so cool. It's kind of like pastors and reverends and preachers. They usually think in terms of analogies. How can I get this scripture or whatever it is, this message across? And if I just write an analogy, oh, now I can personalize, I can see what you're saying there. It's kind of what teachers do. Math is 90% metaphor. And often when kids don't understand the math, they don't get the metaphor the teacher's using at the time. But I find just the right metaphor, you totally get it. So I told them they have to be responsive, because that's actually what's happening in a lot of classrooms. Square peg, round hole. Would you agree? Yeah. In order for you to be compliant, I have to shave your sharp corners so you can fit, and I can jam you into the hole. So you can be one more automaton, one of the pod people in the Body Snatchers movies. No. So the thing you have to realize is school wasn't meant to meet the needs of really different kids. And in order for a teacher to do it, you have to be kind of countercultural, a little radical, part ways in school's procedures. But the number one thing to all students want to know is, does anyone out there know me and see the gold inside me that my parents can't see and I can't see? See, if they see that you help them transcend their current condition, they'll move mountains for you. But if they see that all you do is reflect back to them all their weaknesses, think about it. What if you showed up at a job where all day long all you did is work on the stuff you're weak at doing? Because there's a deficit. I need to improve you. You're not worthy yet. Wouldn't you give up and not even work at that job, or even sabotage the job so you get fired? So I have to make sure the kids understand I'm going to help you aspire to something more than you are, and I'm going to give you the tools to rise, not just keep reminding you of how you fall short. It's a very different thing. So, I didn't know if you were aware of this. I just want to make sure you're aware. The brain develops from the back of the head forward. You know the myelin sheath that lines the neurons, so the sodium potassium ion pump can carry the impulse out of the axons to the dendrites, across with the neurotransmitters, all this stuff. The last thing to come online, guys, is the front part, and it's really the front part of the front part. The prefrontal cortex. The stuff right behind your forehead. At what age does it come online? 18 to 25. It's firing in full thrusters. Wait, what's up here? The last stuff to develop. Well, let's take a look. You think anything there is important to good schooling? Ah! Yes, all of it. How about this? Planning and being aware of timelines. Personal responsibility, self-discipline. Reading a social situation, responding appropriately. That's all there. Impulsivity control, so they're not distracted by other stuff. I have kids who think, these are high school freshmen. If I jump off a one-story building with an umbrella open, I'll slow down enough, I will not break my legs, just like Mary Poppins. Go ahead. Somebody kind of heavy walks through the door, they go, whoa, you are so fat. No impulsivity control, no filter. You know what comes out? Ah! And they delay and delay and delay, totally think they know it. How about this one? Yes, Mom, I totally have it in my book bag. I've got it all. No, I've got to go. Stop cranking on me. I can't believe you do that. 2 hours later, you get a call at work. I forgot this on the kitchen counter. Can you bring it? That's executive function, all right? If you recognize anything in here, okay, don't point fingers at your spouse. But if you really do recognize anything, it's there. So I need to build that in there. But one of the things that's very curious, a lot of people don't know, unless you really study the brain, is that 95% of everything that goes into the kid's head, up through the later years of high school, goes to emotional response centers. Not cognition and thoughtful stuff. But emotional response. Because the back of the head, if you remember, cerebellum, brainstem, the internal brain right there, the amygdala, the hippocampus, those things develop first. So all 5 are full thrusters. They're ready to rock and roll, man! Let me do an emotional response! I am so ready! So sometimes they laugh at the unlaughable, they cry at the uncryable. It's inappropriate to cry at the uncryable. Crying is not the end of the world. You guys have the calmness of maturity. They don't. It's an emotional roller coaster. So, these are 2 neurotransmitters that are huge for kids' success in schools. Dopamine for mental acuity, and serotonin for reasonableness. You need a good balance of both. You can see what they both do, but it's diet, exercise, and sleep, baby, that keeps things in good balance for most people. Now, I will tell you, some kids actually have physiological chemical imbalance, and they might need occasional pharmaceutical stuff to help balance it for a short period of their life. But most of us can balance it with this stuff. What are we talking about in sleep? 9 to 11 hours. When was the last time your kid got 9 hours of sleep before showing up for the classroom? It's really scary, I know, it's hard to do that. But to be really honest, if you want to really be effective, high schools and middle schools should start about 9:30 or 10 in the morning and go to about 4:30 in the afternoon. That's prime time. Just saying. But we don't do that because buses run everything. I thought this is really interesting. You might be aware of it. Emotion really just drives all attention, and kids don't learn unless they're attentive to it. So I told teachers, you're going to build in just a little emotional nugget, a compelling emotional thing, a factor in this boring stuff you have to teach. So like I was sharing with them today, and I won't go into the whole story, but I've written about it before, and I can send it to you if you want. But when I teach cite your sources in bibliographic format, which is like so boring and dry, I always plagiarize in front of the kids, and I get caught by a parent who I just happened to invite into the class to observe the class that day for no other reason. And they get up and they start really going at me. They chew me out for my lack of integrity and poor ethics when I would share something I claimed as my own, but really was something else. And I told them what the book was, and I'm hiding behind a binder from which I'm reading. Oh, it's so cool. The kids are like, oh my gosh! And they say the things that kids say, and then vicariously, they feel like the blow to reputation. And I will tell you, I had the daughter of my pastor one time, and he was the one invited in full robes to stand up and accuse me of stuff. I know the faith you practice. Will be words on Sunday, Mr. Wormeli. It was great. I had kids in the DC area who don't practice any religion. They're all over the place, and they were still, I'll never do it. But the idea that they add a little bit of emotion to something is actually pretty powerful. You could do it too. Get it up, create anticipation. The amygdala is the thing in the brain that encodes emotions. Stuff that's going into storage. But the hippocampus, baby, that horseshoe-shaped thing, we love it because that's the thing that actually processes things for long-term retention. So the statement of a teacher, testimony for the effectiveness of a teacher, is that the kids carry it forward. And I tell teachers all the time, you can't do this. I said it, so I must have learned it because I said it out loud because I'm Oz. No, just because you said it doesn't mean they learned it. You can't say you taught it unless you have proof they learned it. So you got to have the proof. It's got to be carried forward as much as you can. So I reminded them of the prioritization of blood, which has all the nutrients for thinking, oxygen, nutrients, everything. The last priority is the cognitive, thoughtful part of the brain. If the kid's stressed out, so you're going to have to pay attention to the emotional atmosphere in the kid's life. Be stressed about something, whatever it is, you have to deal with that. I told teachers, you can't sit there and do this. Don't bother me with the touchy-feely stuff. I just want to teach my curriculum, the kids sit in the class, they learn it. I told all the teachers today, you're this close to educational malpractice. You know not what you're doing. So you really got to get at the emotional side as much as possible. And these are just several things I told teachers about how you're inviting the class. I'm going to skip some of this stuff. You just want to make sure your own child's teacher is very inviting. Lots of cool ideas. I'm going to skip all this and stop here, pause for a moment. This is just one of many research citations that talks about the fact that we're very, very clear in what we found. Never once, if you want to get a kid to be more motivated and everything, to use your grades as punishments of some sort. It actually makes the kid push away from investing in you in the class. And then, when you do discipline, you want to have developmentally responsive stuff, like to have really good lesson design that's like compelling and interesting, but also to have a good relationship with the kids and the way I interact when they do break a rule, and then do I have consequences? Well, I'd like to suggest it's the same thing with parenting. Am I parenting in a way that's actually developmentally appropriate for where they are? Like, you discipline a 13-year-old very different than disciplining an 8-year-old or a 17-year-old. So you'll want to get to see, remember those books, What to Expect When You're Expecting? They have books sort of like that for like every age group. So if you're really struggling with discipline and time management with a kid, you can get some books. I can recommend some to you. I've actually listed some at the end of this handout to say, okay, how am I really going to respond to that? But also, I need to cultivate a positive relationship. And then also, I need to have really clear rules and consequences. It turns out teachers and a lot of parents are really good at only one of those. I'm telling you, you have to kind of be good at all three if you really want to be successful. And they got into this. I just wrote an article that's coming out in June on how do you teach responsibility and self-discipline to kids if you're not going to use grading. So for the sake of time, can I just do this? Would you let me send it to you? If you're curious, just email me. Or I'll send it to Deb and you can ask Deb. And we'll have it both places. You can email me or you can talk to Deb, your superintendent. Is that okay? We'll do that? Now, if there's some ideas there you can see, I wanted to give you a sense of a couple ideas within it. Take a look at that. What if I said this? Well, would you do a report on blood? The kid will be overwhelmed In old school, go to the library. I know your books on blood. You get like 72 books stacked up. Which one do I read? How about today? You plug it into a search engine, blood. 5,462,000 hits. Mom, which one do I look at? It's like overwhelming, right? The brain craves structure. It loves structure and connection. So here's what the teacher should do, or a parent who's working with a child at home. Hey, look, you have 4 parts of blood: red cells, white cells, plasma, platelets. These are the 5 attributes your teacher is asking you to do. So let's set up a matrix or whatever the graphic might be. And all they have to do, now looking at the slide, is they fill in each column and then they take those little pieces from those squares, those rectangles, and they put them in pretty little sentences. So for red cells, carries oxygen and nutrients, 5 million per cc, small rounded dented like little Cheerios, no nucleus, bone marrow spleen. Does this slide look familiar?
Oh, wait, okay, go back.
Yeah. It's just this stuff in the red cells put in pretty little sentences. Writing the rough draft is probably the most mindless activity of all. So writing equals thinking. If a child ever says to you,
I don't know what to write.
he's really saying,
I don't know what to think.
you can't have bad thinking and good writing, or vice versa. You can't do it. So if I help build your thinking, you will totally know what to write. I guarantee it every time. So sometimes if we're working with our kids, we have to help them structure what they're doing because the brain can make sense of it. We're good. We like the connectedness. So if they're taking notes of something, I might suggest just do a T-chart. And I fill in part of it and they fill in the rest until they get to the point where they can do both sides. Okay, I can do that. Some of you know Cornell Notes. Awesome. It's a T-chart with a paragraph at the bottom. What? They take notes of something they're reading or they're watching or doing or listening to. They encapsulate short little phrases on the left. And they just take all the stuff and they write a 3 to 5 sentence little summary paragraph of all the stuff up top. So the coolest way to take notes and move these to long-term retention, which is the goal, that they actually learn this stuff. So every single story ever told, situation comedy, Shakespeare play, movie, thriller, novel, fable, folktale, every single narrative, this is always the structure. Somebody wants, but, so they have to, everything went. So if your child can't do a summary of a story, say, hey, let's fill this in. And then, nonfiction. Science stuff, current events, historical things. Something happens, and then, just give them a template. Kids can fly with it. I make sure my own children, if they're not doing it at school, let alone my students, learn 200 Latin word roots, prefixes, every single year. 200. I want them to decipher it. Like, I've had kids come back and go, hey, Mr. Wormeli, I was the only one who knew biology was, bio-living things, logi studia, biology, study of living things. And I say, isn't biology great? Isn't it cool? But we practice at swim meets in the summer. My kids are competitive swimmers, so we're at swim meets a lot. So we're sitting in the bleachers there, baseball game, church picnic, post office line, grocery line, doesn't matter. I see any of my students or my own children sat CEP. Head pod. What? Cephalopod. Head foot animal molluscus squid. Sir! You may continue shot. Yeah, I do it at Target too. Right out of the blue. We have a really fun game of it. When they see aster, I want them to know that means star. So they can decipher it themselves. That's the cool thing. And then reading notations. The kids actually interact with every single line. They have to put a little notation next to it. These are cool tools. The kids have tools. They feel really, really motivated. Annotation, how do you write stuff in the margins? They might moan and groan at first, but they come back and say, so I'm so thankful you taught me how to do that. So a lot of kids are motivated when they perceive that they have confidence. If they don't think that they have the tools, they drag their feet. So you might want to say, maybe my kids unmotivated because they didn't have the tools. By the way, this is every single analogy I've ever found in kindergarten through 12th grade curriculum. I wrote a whole book on metaphors and analogies used to teach every single subject. I'm really into that stuff. It's the world of cognitive linguistics, in case you're curious. Well, my students and my own biological kids memorize all of them. So now they're in a new situation, right? They're watching a movie or reading something. And you go, hey, that's increasing intensity. It's the same relationship between those two as it is between those two. Hey, Mr. Woman, that's tool is the tool user. Yeah, it is way cool. That's category and element in category. Thinking analogously is actually huge to human interaction. Like you and I are getting along right now because we share common analogies and metaphors. A lot of stuff I've said, probably every 3 sentences I've had an embedded analogy and metaphor that you just You didn't even recognize as one because of the way we interact with each other. You're also doing this, ceaselessly comparing everything I say. Well, that's just like, oh, that is so not like, we're human, we do that. Or it's ceaseless comparison mode. So it's powerful stuff. I'm going to get across to kids. That's another example of it. But it's really amazing, and you would have been like so amazed. Oh, now we're moving on. I've got about 5 minutes left, and I need to honor that time. So I'm going to show you what's here, pause a few places, and then say goodbye. But I'll stay and do questions or more of these slides specifically for those who want to do that. This is a wonderful video. If we have time at the end, I'd be glad to show you. But it's actually available on YouTube. So if you just want to circle this one again, go work at this. And what you'll get from it is what we really know about motivation. And then how it's really, if I give kids a perception of their own competence, their own tools, that's the role of a parent or a teacher. Let me show you, reveal the tools you already had inside you, or give you tools if you don't currently perceive you have them. It's fine, we can do that. But that's a powerful video, and I'm going to make this prediction. When you read it, there's one moment in the video where you will gasp. You will have an audible, oh, oh! It's that cool of a video. Okay, that's to entice you to go try it on YouTube. It's a little teaser. You can email me later and say, yes, I had an audible gasp. I was sitting by myself. I didn't think I would do it, but I did. So, to continue, I wanted to share with you that there are 3 kind of models out there that when you read about them, you go, oh my gosh, that's why he does that, or she does that. And this is what I can do to totally help them grow and mature and not do that anymore. The first one is called executive function. All right? So starting on this slide is the overview of it. But that's that front part. Remember all those skills I told you about? Well, what I did, okay, that's the kid who struggles with executive function issues. What I did is I gave you indicators of problems. Some of the ones I already said to you orally. They're up here, okay? And then, these are just all examples. But coming after it, executive function kids who struggle is the same thing as a parent or a teacher who does the Charlie Brown teacher.
Yes, ma'am? Yeah, never read it anymore.
That's what they hear.
Why, Jimmy? Just stop screaming. I should explain that. Sure. Darn you, Annie.
Why is the kid responsible?
And they said you could crush a man's skull with one hand.
Those are executive function skills, and all of them are vital to student success. But the thing is, there's not one strategy that works, and it changes with kids over time, just so you know. All right? So what I've got for you is every slide has at least one, and some of just 3 or 4 different cool ideas. So there's a huge section, and I wrote an article on executive function that has this far more coherently. If you're like, but you're going to get up to speed in executive function if you think your child is suffering from it at all, some issues. There's a whole bunch of them in a row, including how to give feedback to kids. Remember we told you some good ideas on that. And at the end of it, there's a lot. I give you 2 slides of resources that are really practical. Can I just tell you, most of these are written for parents. So you already have a leg up. They're written for you. My article is that bottom one. But if you want to, let me just send you the article, the original draft. It has more ideas in it than the one that actually ran. Because they have to cut it for column space. Lots of stuff. Then, the second one is self-determination theory. And if you look in the lower paragraph, it talks about you want kids to mature, you give them autonomy, confidence, and relatedness. Things are connected and related. The kids mature pretty well. And then, this is about self-regulation, the emotional regulation, like, do I control my anger rather than just get real divisive with you, like, instantly? There's some adults who still need to learn this. Like, somebody yells out at the State of the Union address, you lie! Need self-regulation. Okay? Well, this is just a really famous story about that. About, not that incident, but self-regulation. But what I've got for you is, you remember Emotional Intelligence? Daniel Goleman's really popular book. Self-regulation is one of the biggest things there. Well, it turns out you have executive function, self-determination theory. And then you have self-regulation. When parents get up to speed on this stuff, and I gave you lots of websites and resources to go to, they really get into it. This is one advertised that just came out 2 weeks ago from a good friend of mine. Very practical guy who travels all over the world. And it's how you do self-regulation in the classroom. There are a few things in here that are good for parents, but it'd be a really cool thing to give to a teacher as a little gift if you think they're struggling with your child in their class. Can I just teach you about self-regulation, please? Those are articles I've written. I'd be glad to send you if you like. If we have time, I would do this creativity puzzle, but let's just see if you can get the answer right away. Which letter doesn't belong? I need a reason why, too. Anybody? The C doesn't have a little stem, straight stick on it. It's also an open figure. It's got a hole in it, yeah. Well, they all have holes, sort of. Oh yeah, the Q, P, and D are kind of the same letter if you translate it and move them around, yeah. Which letter requires another letter in order to function in most words? Q. So sound as well. P, D, C, Q. If I gave you a lot of time, which I normally do when we have a longer time together, you could probably come up with 5 or 6, maybe 10 reasons for every single letter. But what will your own children say? The letter doesn't belong is the... Don't play by the rules. What letter doesn't belong? It's the T. Or the slightly rotated X. You have to look at negative space, not just positive space. If you're going to be a good parent, you're going to have to think divergently and break the rules once in a while. So that was the message from this. I do this in classrooms a lot just to breed that, cultivate that creativity. Now, does that look like tenacity? Perseverance? Yeah. How about this one? You can do it, right? My favorite is this one. Easy, easy, stay, stay, stay. Yeah. Well, what you've got here, and these are just a whole bunch of slides in a row you don't have, they're just about examples in our culture of tenacity and perseverance. Like William Wilberforce tried to get rid of slavery in the UK. Malala. Yeah. That's the real Balto. I don't know if you're aware of that. The real Balto from the Disney movie is stuck. You can actually see the real Balto. And there's a statue dedicated to it in New York. You can see. She came rolling 12 different rejections from publishers, but those first 11 are kicking themselves now. And then Dr. Seuss, all those rejections for his first one. This is dribbled. Nobody will read this. Wrong! And then all these things, Apollo 13, Rudy, Jaime Escalante, Stand and Deliver, you may have seen that. Civil Rights Movement, Bilbo's Journey to Complex Knowledge, October Sky, all about tenacity and perseverance. It's everywhere in our American ethic. We love it. So we teach the kids. Well, what I did with teachers today, I had them read this really esoteric, boring stuff from Wikipedia. Like, look at all that, right? And I said, go on to slide 2. And they read, they're like, what? Go to slide 3, please. What are you doing? This is like so boring. Go to slide 4. And try to create empathy for what your students feel like in your class. And I kept saying, it's really important. There's going to be a test on it. And then, of course, we talked about what kept you reading. You're a rule follower. Or you had enough experience with Rick to know that it might be boring now, but it eventually will lead to something important. So what would keep you reading? We talked about it, and there's a whole bunch of slides in a row here. Like I remember in this one about the marshmallow experiment. Some of you know that stuff. How do you really build tenacity and perseverance? And there's a whole bunch of slides in a row about motivation. Like look at the fish on the left. Do you think that fish is really engaged in his task? You swim around for a while, then something pops with that energy. That's engagement. The other fish over there, yeah, they're just being compliant. So I asked teachers, is there a difference between being on task and being engaged? Yeah. You can control people. You can't motivate. That comes from inside. But you can control, you can coerce. So there's all these different ideas about that, including like the great philosophers, Calvin and Hobbes. That's a good stuff. At any rate, there's several slides that we know about motivation, and what doesn't work, what does work, and then they give you a bunch of stuff. Some of you know those. Punctuation saves lives, about meaning making. So there's a whole series here of meaning. It turns out kids get really, really engaged when there's meaningfulness, not just sense making. So if I said, what were the 5 protections under the First Amendment? Kid lists it, that's sense making. Meaning making is where I make connections among other things in my life. can recode it in terms of something I understand. I use something in one class in another person's class or in the real world. Now that's meaning making. There's lots of cool ideas. So if we had, 3 or 4 or 5 hours, you'd be so amazed and so excited by this stuff right now. You'd be so impressed. I'm so glad I spent an evening with that guy. All the stuff is on meaning making. Look at the pretty colors. Ooh, ah. Now talk about meaning making. This is the curriculum a lot of teachers, or a lot of students as they perceive it. And they say, memorize this, come up with a mnemonic, it's going to be on the test. And the kid goes, I don't know, something like that. It means nothing. But what if the teacher was so smart and good at his or her job? And this is actually particularly personal for me. Takes all those letters, rearranges them, rechunks it so they can relate to each other and mean something to these two. This teacher did this specifically for me. And the way she rearranged it, I will never ever forget these letters ever again. And in fact, it takes my breath away. Because here's how the teacher rearranged it. Ready? When my kids say that, I melt. I'll do anything you want. You need to go and get donuts? Let's go get donuts. I'll do it. I don't really care. You're my thought. It's amazing how we do that. So I gave you a whole bunch of resources that are really cool to get up to speed on the mindset needed for standards, reference grading, and maturation. Look at the title of that book. Is that not a message you want to get across to your own child? You fall down 7 times, you will get an 8. That's Debbie Silver, who's an educator, and she writes about what do we know about motivation, how it works with kids. Look at these. All about resilience. All of them I've read are all really good. As far as getting your kid to really learn self-discipline, resilience, there's executive function stuff again. Larry Ferlazzo is a friend of mine. He's a high school teacher in Sacramento. He writes books on how to get kids to drive themselves, to create autonomy. That's pretty cool. Oh, there's me, shameless plug, to put my own kids through college. The one to the right goes for classes, how do you engage kids? This is just a whole bunch of education magazines about motivation that really work. I wrote articles in this one and this one. That's why they're there. Shameless plug, Their articles are really good. What do we know about social emotional health? And the one before it, what do we know about motivation? The third article in there I wrote. And then some ideas about, ropes courses, project adventure kind of stuff. These are the training manuals for how to help people learn to solve problems. It's kind of helpful. And now there's a whole section here on homework, and if we had time I would show you all this stuff, and you'd be so wowed. It's really good. At the end of this though, at the end of it, I gave you some really cool books on homework. That top one was written by 2 parents. They did research of homework and tried to figure it out. I actually agree with most of that book. It's a really cool book. That top one, Bennett and Kalish. But if you wanted to get some of the research on homework, you might want to choose Harris Cooper or Alfie Kohn, or the one that says Kathy Vatterott. That Kathy Vatterott, Rethinking Homework, is probably the most popular book in schools in America, as far as the go-to manual for what we know about homework today. I am writing a book right now on homework. So in 2017, mine will be the go-to book. At least so I hope. We'll see what happens. There's 2 books in line down below, but I would not get those. They have sections in them on homework, but the rest of the books are much better on homework. So now here's the deal. I have gone over the time by about 5 minutes. I apologize for that. You can come late 5 minutes next time we get some of those lines. But I need to honor your time and let those people need to go gracefully go. So can we take 2 minutes and go and just thank you for giving your time and know that this doesn't have to stop here. So if you want to do a Google Hangout or Skype or a phone call or email after today, I'm up for that. I travel a lot. So if you send me an email requesting something and I don't respond within a few days, a friendly nudging reminder is always welcome. It's not an imposition. Because I do email triage running to the airport. It's really, really okay. Thank you for your time. See ya. And in 2 minutes we'll start with your question. Go while you still get a graceful chance. Thanks. And you're like the boss guy.
So that's the reason we're not sharing that, because I don't think it's fair to kids.
Well,
And not to future employers and colleges until we have fidelity and scoring of that. And more parents that call in and talk to teachers about that will also help us process it faster.
your feedback really does help. In our situation, we have kids, we have class participation grade, or class discussion grade. You may be familiar with this from your own experience. And so you got an introvert. My daughter's an introvert. And she says nothing, but she's absolutely 100% invested. She's totally engaged in everything. But she doesn't talk a lot. So she get an F on class participation. No. Then you got a kid who talks a lot, but he says very little. Even though he's like chatterbox, right? He shouldn't get an A. But you have a lot of kids game the system. Yeah, I agree with David. Mr. Wormeli, I talked. That's a tally mark for class participation. It's a problem. So we have to sit down, teacher to teacher to teacher, and go, seriously, they have to say something that advances the conversation, and they must refer to the previous speaker as they make their comment. In other words, we have to get really specific on what that is, and then grades are first and foremost. Every book that's ever written, communication. Clear, transparent, honest, candid communication. Nothing else. Not reward, not compensation, nothing. Right? So then we have to get across to moms and dads so they can help their child interpret and really figure out how to work with them on it. But I'm not going to penalize some kid who's an introvert for class participation grade because he doesn't talk a lot. That's such a simplistic teacher mindset. Oh, talking is the only way you can manifest your participation. No! That's a bias. And we have to teach teachers not to. But it's a long conversation.
We're working on that, trying to capture fidelity on the employability citizenship thing because it does mean doing something. And students need to have, and the way students are going to have ownership in it is if they know where it's going. They know who's going to see it. And if it's just mom and dad, unless they just really want to impress mom and dad, it doesn't mean much to them. But if they know that it could go to a future employer, if they're going for a job interview and they call up the school and say, such and such applied for a job out here, can you send me their employability citizenship scores? Oh, well that means something to me now as a student. I want to make sure that that's what I'm doing, what I need to do at school to make that happen. And we have to do a better job as educators in our buildings with those kids. It means something. Read the rubric, know what the categories are, score the child, or the young man or woman where they are. And when you get a score like that, parent-teacher conferences or an email or a phone call, talking to the teacher about those is definitely what needs to happen. But if they respond with what you heard, that needs to be followed up with. That should follow up with the building administrators.
But going back to this conversation, what is the conference like? You get way more knowledge about your kid than what he knows. And it's actually really kind of cool. It's exciting. So look forward to it.
Something that concerns me on implementation, and came up over here earlier with workload with teachers, and it just, we didn't have time. And as a teacher, you have 10 more grades, 10 more scores.
The data entry, you have to keep that.
Absolutely. But you have to keep up with a lot more doing this. I mean, it just is more intensity. And so that's that as efficient is what we have to get through is
Deficient.
The employability citizenship scores come out 4 times a year.
well, but that's one example of the amount of scoring that it takes, because now you're not just scoring that. That's an example of how you're scoring the standard reference.
By the way, a lot of people do those efforts in employability, they have smaller scales, so you don't have to deliberate as much. So they might just say 2, 1, 0. And now there's not this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 stuff. And so it's easier to say, well, it's got 2s or it's got 1s or whatever. It's not that big of a deal. You might want to consider using different symbols in a smaller
Well, that's
scale.
something our council can look at. I mean, the council is the one that came up with the rubric.
But here's the thing too, when I grade a test now, here are the questions with that standard, here are the questions with that standard. It's actually very quick and easy for me to do it. And you get faster at it. I can honestly tell you this. Before I got into standards reference grading in my own classroom practice, I didn't have nearly as much of a life. I have more of a life now. Like I can have family come to me. Because I'm not doing nearly as much remediation at the end. Kids are actually getting their act together, they're maturing a lot more, they're getting this. Because once they've been in for a few years, they actually learn how to be a better student quite often. So I have more of a life. The first year I did it, nightmare, I had no life. But that's what cultural shift is, it's hard. So I don't tolerate whining teachers. Teaching is a hard job. You're not trying to get easy and get out of it. I'm not going soft on you on purpose. It's a hard job. It's not meant for everybody. But by year 2, you start getting a life back. But it's a difficult process. But truly, we have so many cool software packages now for electronic grading. You guys have Parent Portal or Parent View where you go online and see grades? So yeah, there's so many software packages now. It makes actually my record keeping a lot easier. A lot of new stuff's going on. I would love
Maybe Jeff had this stuff back, 38 years ago when I started. So I used to have, guys, I had 5 grade books per quarter, 20 grade books per year. Because I'd have 1 grade book for every class, every grade that I taught, I would fill up and everything. So I told teachers, I used to grade uphill 10 miles each direction. No whining, you little whippersnapper. We have so many cool tools today to make the teacher's job much easier. So I think you're right, the workload is going to be tremendous because change is hard. But once you're there, it's like, why was I worried? It's like breathing, it's pretty easy. But it's hard to convince people that.
In defense of the teachers, I don't know that we did a very good job of rolling the citizenship employability from our curriculum council into the buildings. I mean, we split the grade in terms of what you know and are able to do about the content with class participation, behavior, all the different, there's 5 different areas, I think, 4 or 5 different areas that we rank them on. We made the assumption that teachers would look at individual kids and give a rubric score for those kids in those 4 or 5 areas. And what we found was it was a drag and drop to a default setting at the beginning. And we're slowly working our way. You'll see more and more teachers are doing it with fidelity. And some of the areas that it's going to come back and bite us is when it comes to like National Honor Society selections or some other type of scholarship or something of that nature. When the scores on the employability citizenship rubric don't match the kid, and it's obvious that they don't match the kid. And some of those things will come back to haunt us if we don't get our act together with that and have fidelity with it. Now, whether or not we take a 5-point rubric and get rid of 2 or 3 levels and shrink it down, and that's going to make it easier for teachers to, I only need to really memorize 3 levels, not 5 levels across 4 areas in order to get scores. We may have to do that in order to get it, but we do think it's important that those things do not get involved with the grade of content, what kids are knowing to do with the content.
And I know reiterate that it's on us as parents to take that forward, to take that to the building, not to let that teacher off. We don't let our kids off. Don't let the teacher off.
But there's a way to say it with civility. The teacher hears it, doesn't get defensive. Because anybody can push into a corner easily. And the teacher's like, I thought I was doing the right thing. And now the parents coming in and attacking me. You weren't attacking, you were just sharing a concern, but they saw it as an attack. So find that diplomatic way.
Well, I think that's that it's not all on the school to have this communication. The parent has to get involved. We have to be told what this means. But I also think the other side of that is, this is also going to take a little bit of the human factor out to the teacher. As a human being.
Subjectivity.
As a human being, you see a kid, you just don't connect. But having to go out this 1 through 5 is going to make you take a closer look at that kid and what else is going on with them. And maybe that helps that teacher with the reteacher.
The child is fully dimensionalized, not just more book paper to grade.
Right.
That's actually really helpful. But it's easier to dismiss a kid or see him as a caricature of a stereotype when you really don't know much else about the kid. It's just, I have 185 kids, I gotta fly through it. I will also tell you that most teachers, when the parent sends twice a month email, how's my child doing, or something like that, just checks in, you're more mindful of that child in your lesson design, and you're more thoughtful in the grading, because you're aware that the parent's voice is there. There's a lot of interaction. This is a fully dimensionalized person. If I see you at my church or the grocery store or anything like that, it really helps. So I think it's actually very cool. A lot of times in middle school and high school, parents back away and know he's got to fly solo and say, no, they need you more there, more present, not less. You have room mothers and all that stuff in elementary school, room parents, all that stuff. You need that stuff in middle and high school.
You're going to offer your teachers for the academic part of school. And if there is a point where we're going to be sharing employability skills, that skill with future employers, colleges.
Are those scores changeable too?
Is there a way to reteach that? I mean, because truly, like you said before, these kids aren't developed. How can you say that when this kid is 16,
tell you colleges comment on that. I'm sorry, you'll have to respond in a second. I just want to tell you real quickly. They love it when they see freshman to senior year, all of them put together, and they see your progression as you get more mature. And they love that, and they take the senior year stuff as the most indicative, which means you have to really fight senioritis. Make sure they don't slump off as much as you can. But if they see that things were not so hot freshman, sophomore year, there's growth, that's actually okay. It's the end of the year stuff, but they love seeing the whole 40. I'm sorry, go.
Well, I guess my answer to that would be that, we've done this K-12 with the employability citizenship thing, and actually we've been doing it in elementary for eons. I mean, the elementary report cards reflected this kind of attributes forever. That's why the elementary report cards have been like on legal size paper, because it's just had all this information on it. And so my response to that would be that as we build fidelity, we also need to have parents at parent-teacher conferences, or if they don't go to parent-teacher conferences, when they get that in the mail and something with a typo tag on it, that they're asking and calling and wanting to know what the issue is, what do they see specifically with that. And if you get a response like I got or like you got, then you should follow up with the building administrator. But if you get a response from the teacher that, well, this is what I'm seeing in class, and we can talk about it, and then these are the things you can help me on at home with this attribute or whatever it may be, whether it's participation or whether it's behavior or whatever the case may be, or maybe we should come in together and talk and have a meeting and we can talk about these things, and then you can find out what truly the root cause of why the teacher feels this is. And it could be a miscommunication thing, it could be that they didn't understand the student's narrative. Example, my son 2 weeks ago asked a clarifying question in the class, and the teacher left the room crying.
Why?
And she felt that my son's question was inferring to the class that she didn't know what she was doing. And he was just asking just an honest question. He was just asking a question, wanting clarification of the question. He wasn't thinking anything beyond that. Anything deeper than he was not deep in this question. And she left the room. But it was another kid had been this instigator in the classroom, was doing all these things. The teacher was getting upset. My son stepped in and said, wait a second, what's this question about? Teacher snapped and left the room.
That's fragile.
So then, okay, so now when we get to this employability citizenship score, and my son's now getting low scores in that area because of this situation with the teacher, now it's sitting there thinking as a parent going, not as a superintendent, but as a parent going, okay, we have to follow through with this because, my issue is that one, I need that clarified, that he wasn't trying to call the teacher out of the park with his question, but two, who did that teacher talk to about being upset
With your son.
with
at
my
one
son,
moment.
and what the implications are for my son when my son
In
goes
later
to the
classes
teacher's
that day,
classroom.
yeah.
Oh, that's Nick Embry, I'll tell you what, he's a real deal, man. Right? I mean, he's gonna be doing all these things. So going in and having a conference with the teachers and clarifying that information and helping for understanding is what needs to happen in order to work through it. Otherwise, things can just, and our teachers are learning that they need to stay in the frontal precortex as a teacher, as an adult. They can't go back into the limbic part of the brain because that's where all the kids are. And they all operate on emotion. And you heard that from Rick tonight, that the frontal precortex doesn't develop in kids until 18 to 25. Well, as an adult, as a teacher, I have to stay up here. Because if I go back here, then I'm hitting kids head on with emotion, and we're not going to get anywhere. And they're just losers in that regard. And I think that's what happened in the teacher situation. She went from here to here and got into it with the class. And my son was a fatality, so to speak, in that situation. But going in and having that conversation and clarifying that with the teacher helps that situation. So when I'm looking at a parent-teacher conference and I see a 2 or a 3 on that, I'm asking for clarification. I'm asking for examples or evidence of what my child or son or daughter are doing that would cause that score to happen. And what can I do as a parent to support you in the classroom?
Okay, all right. Shut all the lights down and sound down.
That has to be in real time, because if you get it in the 9th week and then you just let it go, and then it gets
I
a
guess it's
semester,
good
the
if it's
score is the same,
Yeah.
and you let it go,
10
More
times.
people,
you
right?
know, a whole year go by, and we're not correcting the behavior, we're not correcting that employability or citizenship skill that we say is important for kids to have and know what to do. But if the response is, oh, I just didn't have time, or I give all my
It's
kids
a red flag, so many
or I give, those are the red flags that go up and say, we need to have further conversation, because it is important, because if we are going to release them, this is kind of the chicken or the egg. You get good at fidelity, and maybe we need to tweak the scale and shrink it down so that, we don't have as many categories, so that staff, if you're going to grade 5 areas and have 5 different levels in those 5 areas,
Just say 3, just say 4.
figure that out.
Get parents up.
We don't want to give that up. We still think those things are important for kids to know and be able to do. So whatever it takes to do that, we need to do it with fidelity. Whether it's a 5x5 or whether it's a 3x5 or whatever it is, we need to have fidelity in doing it. But I can't right now pull the trigger and say, hey, we're releasing this to colleges and we're releasing this to future employers. Make sure you're accurate.
No pressure. All futures are at stake.
I'm sorry, what?
How can it ever be accurate? How do you get it? Everyone's human, not everyone is going to relate to someone the same way. It's just a matter of opinion. Really,
So is
Well,
academic
it's
rating,
not-
it's very subjective.
I'm hoping it's more than opinion, because it is a rubric, and they have to score it to the rubric. So a 3 means this, that your
So
son
there's
does
specific
something.
evidence right now, what it would be. The student actually says and does the following actions.
And you're gonna have a teacher, more than that, had a teacher that they were gonna get a high score on that no matter what. She could have, but that was one teacher. Every teacher does it. So if I'm an employer, I hire kids off the street now. If I have that in front of me and I see 5-5, like with his son, 5-5-4-4, 5-5-4, and then all of a sudden 3s, and then back to 5-5-4. I'm not going to judge one out because I know human nature. I have coworkers. I don't know where I have ones across the board. I have coworkers. Every other coworkers can have it at 5. Employers and college entrance people know kids. They've got to. They have to have that one too. And I know too many.
Well, when you get into this though, teachers sit down with each other and go, look, seriously, what will be a 3 in this thing? It's kind of weird and abstract. What will be a 3? What will be a 2? What will be a 1? And they actually have to try to calibrate their evidence with each other. So it gets closer and closer to a consistency, but it'll never be perfect. There are still some teachers who say a 4, you have to impress me, it's something above and beyond.
This rubric is not individualized. This is a standardized rubric across the district. So, and it's by level, by building. So the 9-12 rubric, the 6-8 rubric, the 8-5 rubric. So those rubrics are set, and they've already been vetted, and they've already been leveled, they're already there. So, and the rubrics are online. So when you see a 5-4, I don't think the rubric goes out with the grade reports. It just has the grade report and the scores. But I think the rubric's online. It would be nice if we included the rubric in with the score sheet, so that when you get home and you read the 3, you look on the 3 and it's like, sometimes does this. The next category.
So is it consistency, the amount of times they do it? That's the only criteria? So it's like, does it consistently, does it sometimes, does it not at all kind of thing? It's the number of times they do the thing.
I don't know if it's completely.
Or is it about quality?
I don't know if it's quantitative. I think it's quantitative and
I'd be
qualitative.
curious to see.
In terms of what it looks like right now. I can't pull it off the top of my head right now in terms of all the different areas. But I know we work very hard to create that rubric. But if the rubric is too complex and the rubric is too big in order for teachers to have fidelity with it, then we need to do something about it. That has to change, or somehow fidelity has to come into it on the teacher side so that students have accurate scores before we release any of this information. So I do think it's a little bit more than personal opinion. But then again, when you go back to conversation, If you see consistently your son or daughter is getting fours, a couple threes here and there, but from all the teachers that they interact with, you know, that would to you, especially at the middle high level, that would indicate to you that there's, with all the teachers, that's probably a consistent thing. All the teachers are seeing the same thing out of your son or daughter. It's when you get what I got, or maybe other parents got, where you have that one teacher is like all twos or all threes, but every other teacher is a 4 and a 5. Or you have some threes, but 4s or 5s, but then you have this one outlier. To me, that's a further conversation. And it's my wife and I was like, okay, even if it's right, even if it's accurate, we want to know more about that because we want to know how to support the teacher in the classroom. I feel, no, my son or daughter is not going to be acceptable having 2s in these areas for this teacher. What can I do to support you in the classroom?
Well, the other thing is, that you look at is, you've got 5 areas, if they're getting 2, they're not saying, you know, 5. That equals more weight than they got 2 in one
Something
area
to address.
versus one teacher.
Yeah. So those are the things we have to work on to get good at. And our teachers heard today, relationships are important, extremely important. We got to do things to know about kids. And you saw that slide tonight by Rick that said, you know, does anybody know I'm here? And do they know me? You know, the square peg round hole thing. We've got to get better at knowing kids and what their idiosyncrasies are and how they learn, what they're about, not just, I taught it, you should have learned it. And I'm not saying that our teachers are, that's the general makeup of how we do things. But we're in the process of getting better. And we're realizing over time that assumptions about what should happen and what does happen are not in line. You know, they're just not. And we have to provide better support, better professional development so that our kids are better being successful because their teachers are more plugged into things that we're now knowing about that we didn't know about before. You know, when I taught, I didn't have any training on cognitive side of the brain. What all the parts of the brain, what they do, how they function when they come online. What am I supposed to do about that? You know, when I came out of prep college to be a teacher, we didn't have any of that.
We give a lot of tools today to really start getting up the kids and do some of that stuff. So hopefully you'll see evidence of that in the weeks ahead.
Yeah. So the standards reference grading system is going to be piloting and it's going to be studied again for another year. We're not going to pull the trigger on that until we feel a lot more comfortable about it and that we have a lot more community engagement.
When you say it's being piloted right now, have the teachers, lessons, have they established their 4-7 or 4-8, whatever standards?
Power standards, gold
That
standards.
they're doing this on, or?
Some of the classes have, some of the, we're piloting, and I think we have one teacher in each department that are piloting it in the high schools. Is Hutch still up there?
No.
I just left.
Kelly, is it one teacher per content that's piloting the standards base, or is it just,
It's even smaller than that. It's like in a certain department.
so like 1 or 2 teachers in the, I wanted to say it was in social studies
Yes.
that they were doing it.
Correct.
So social studies doesn't have their curriculum rewritten. So they're in the process of doing that. And so they're just putting together a rubric based on what their current curriculum is. They're going to go through our process moving forward. So as they come forward, Kelly, social studies they're implementing.
They're doing first year of first draft of their curriculum.
So they're validating this year.
Yes.
Okay. So they have their new curriculum written, but they're validating it right now for gaps and overlaps. So they probably would have their power standards of what they need to know and kids to know and be able to do. But they're putting it in our traditional way that we do grading, and they're also mirroring that in the standard reference grading system. They're not sharing this out. This isn't going anywhere. This is just how do we see this work? It does it work? Can we make it work? And then hopefully we'll have more teachers try and pilot it in that regard. So it's not a public thing. It doesn't go on anybody's report card. It doesn't go on anybody's transcript.
How do you make sure that our education for the children is meeting the quality it should when they're trying to pilot this and look at all the reviews and retakes, one of the comments I heard from a parent that had a child in the school was when they went, the teacher told them, well, I wasn't able to cover everything I was supposed to this year because I got 3 retakes and I had to keep reteaching. So I think there's, one of the fears is that the education that my child will get is not, maybe not a par of what it should be because we're too busy doing a lot of retakes and a lot of reteaching, and they're sitting there waiting for everybody else to catch up or be where they are.
See, to me, that's an unacceptable response from an educator to a parent. And my advice to you on that would be ask for further clarification as to why we're doing so much reteaching and reassessing. Because the research that we're studying and we're looking at is indicating to us that students with quality instruction, 80% of those students should be able to pass the assessment first time through without any additional support. And that you're dealing with that, probably that 10 to 15%, because there's probably 5% that you're going to be struggling with anyway that are going to not make it, but you're in that 10 to 15 range that you should be doing reteach, reassessments with. But if a teacher is doing retakes, reassessments with a high percentage of their students in the classroom, that's a concern. Because to me, that doesn't mean that quality instruction necessarily is happening, or there's a misalignment in terms of what they're teaching to what they're assessing. And we do a lot of work in that to align our curriculum to our assessments, or our assessments to our curriculum. So it's just further conversations that need to happen. As a parent, that's an unacceptable response, and as an educator, that's an unacceptable response. We know that, and we were told, there's more curriculum than we're possibly able to cover. Even when you look at the Common Core standards and what we're able to do, most of the higher up educators in the nation that work for nonprofit foundations that write curriculum materials and resources, they even make choices of the standards. They're all covered, but some have way higher correlation and higher priority than the others. Some of them are maybe surface touched because they've decided that out of this vast amount of standards, these narrowed down things are the things that that will make kids successful at the next level. So they've done that. And sometimes what we have done at pre-K-12 level is said, here are all the standards. You as professional educators decide which ones are the most important, your power standards, and then you're going to touch on all of this stuff, but you're going to spend emphasizing this amount of time here and there. What we've realized from that is our teachers may not have the training or may not have the knowledge base to do that on their own. And so that's why we brought in more resources and more help to guide our curriculum writing, to guide our development, because our teachers are lacking that. And so I would say that what we're doing here in Glenwood is good. It's better than a lot of places around. We're probably on the cutting edge when it comes to the things that we're trying to accomplish here. So we're a good district with a lot of good things going on, but of the good things that we're doing and going on, we have some hot messes. We're not, I wouldn't say that we are damaging or negatively impacting kids. We have raised the bar. And if you talk to any elementary teacher in our district, they will tell you, 3 years ago, they would have said, our kids can't learn this. This is impossible for our kids to learn. And today they're saying, I can't believe what our kids are learning right now. I never would have guessed they would have been able to get to that level. We have to duplicate that in 6-12. And that's what we're trying to do and accomplish right now. That's kind of where I'm at. I guess
You probably should hear teachers talking about differentiation, scaffolding, and tiering. How do I teach a variety of readiness levels all within one class period? It's like the perennial question. Instead of hiding by the factor model, everybody does a lockstep through this. So you're right, there's a scope they need to get through the curriculum. Local committees have said, this is what 4th graders should learn, this is what 10th graders should learn. But it's impossible to do all of it based on the way schools are set up. So you always have some give and take in there. And if I got somebody, like a class, where they're all waiting around for 2 kids, or 5 kids, or 7 kids to do redos, something is whacked out and wrong. And so I find teachers have to learn how to teach smarter, not harder. So how are you more efficient in long-term retention?
we have to teach teachers about cognitive science, what we know about how the brain learns. Otherwise, they're using stuff from like 20 years ago or 30 years ago that we actually know better now. So the PD that goes on with cognitive science is like invaluable. Instead of using 2 decades or 3 decades worth of old stuff to teach the modern student. So I would be just like he was. I'd be like, whoa, the teacher is saying that kind of comment. I'm doing all this redo, so I didn't have time to teach the curriculum. Something really didn't align, and was miscommunicated, because that's not, shouldn't be happening. And those kind of comments, I would agree, take to your building administrator. I assume the building administrators are trained in all this too, and they know what to do with that knowledge that parents give them. So they're good, okay.
We talk about elementary teachers are trained in pedagogy and trained in theories of